It's time for the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Podcast.
We've got lots and lots of things to talk about and to do today.
Covering the territories from the 1940s to the 1990s.
It's the best thing going today.
Interviewing wrestlers, referees, authors, and other media personalities that have made the sport of professional wrestling great.
The cream, yeah. The cream of the crop.
And now, here's your host, Tony Richards.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel History Show. I'm Tony Richards at the Richards Ranch, coming to you with my good friend, live from Florida, Mr. Howard Baum. And tonight, we're talking about Florida 1976. And I know you're really excited about our guest tonight, Howard.
Well, as the shirt says, when you see this symbol, you see the symbol of excellence in professional wrestling.
That's
and
right.
That, my friends, in the wrestling world, is what we're all about tonight, because we have a childhood idol of mine, and I'm not just saying it because he's on the show, Steve Keirn. He was always my guy, one of my favorite top 5 guys in the ring of all time. Put him right up there with anybody. One of my favorite, not one of my favorite, my favorite tag team, the Fabulous Ones. We're going to get into all of it. A real make-a-wish situation for me. And I thank you, Tony. I thank you, Steve Keirn. And I thank you, Wrestling World, for letting this happen.
Awesome, man. Well, we're getting into our 1976 Territory Series, and we're going to do a couple of Florida shows. I want to remind everybody to come over and join us at the Facebook group, the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Facebook group. And you can follow me on X at Tony Richards 4. You can hook up with Howard on Facebook and Twitter as well. What's your X follower, Howard? The Howard Baum?
I'm on there, but I think I'm the Howard Baum. I don't seem to get much traction on there for some reason ever since I stopped showing my feet. But you can certainly seek me out there. I'm the Howard Baum on the Twitter, but you can more easily find me on Facebook as Howard Baum, or please check out my wrestling photography and art at Hardway Art on the Facebook. Okay, people? I would really appreciate it. Come by and say hi.
Right on. We had a question or a comment or something in the Facebook group just a day or two ago. Someone was asking about Tallahassee. And I know that that's on the other end of the state from where you were. You were going to the convention center in Miami Beach on Wednesday nights. Tallahassee was a Friday night show. They had on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, they had 2 shows a night. Monday night was Orlando and West Palm Beach. Tuesday night was Fort Myers and Tampa. And Friday night was Tallahassee and Fort Lauderdale. Wednesday night had 1 show, that was in Miami, and Thursday night had 1 show on the other end of the state in Jacksonville. But specifically about Tallahassee, that building in Tallahassee was built, I believe, by Buddy Fuller. And Buddy was the founder of the Gulf Coast wrestling territory, and he did that a lot. He also did that in Georgia, the building in Griffin, Georgia. The sports arena where they had Saturday night shows in the Georgia territory was built by him. And he had a little horse ranch down there with it too. So that was a common thing that he did. And I think he and Eddie partnered on that building. And I'm trying to think who the third person was that was involved in that. It'll maybe come to me in a minute. But the guy, he made a comment. He said, it was almost like Tallahassee was an afterthought or an orphan.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't in the big 3 or 4 towns, but it was part of the territory, and they did own the building. You and I were talking before we went on tonight about that film clip that's out there with all the people, all the crowds flooding in to see Dusty there.
Yeah. It certainly looked like a horrendous venue. It looked like a big hot box. And much like the Eddie Graham Sports Complex, which I understand was another big corrugated metal steel building that was horrendous to work in, but that was under the same model of own the building, don't pay rent. And that's what Eddie Graham did with the sports complex up there in Orlando.
Oh, I know. It just came to me who the third person was. It was John Regas. John Regas was the early 60s promoter with Buddy Fuller in Memphis. And when John Regas left Memphis, I think in 67, and Burt Bates took over as the promoter in Memphis, they partnered with the nonprofit organization there to have shows. And in Memphis, the nonprofit was the American Legion Post #1. And John Regas was the whatever the executive officer is in an American Legion organization, president or executive director, whatever. That was John Regas. And Burt Bates became that. And when Burt Bates took over in 67, John Regas came down, or he might have left when Buddy left Memphis. But he stayed connected to Buddy Fuller and his promotional stuff. And I believe he was involved in building that building in Tallahassee. So just a little deep trivia for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, that guy certainly sparked a rabbit hole. I wonder what year that building was built.
Well, it probably would have been late 60s, probably, because Buddy came to Georgia in 1966 or 65. I think 65. And he partnered over there with Ray Gunkel. And of course, we know where that eventually went, right? Because Ray had the heart attack, and then there was the big fight with Ray's widow, Ann Gunkel, that started the battle for Atlanta. And Buddy had swapped out his ownership interest with Lester Welch, his uncle, the youngest of the Welch brothers. And I believe, so Lester had an ownership percentage in Florida, and in 72, they swapped, and Buddy came to Florida and Lester went to Georgia. So I think Buddy was involved with Eddie like in the late 60s, and I think they probably built the Tallahassee building then. I wish there was a lot more information. It's almost like you got to piece it together with little fragments, of things that you find. But
Yeah,
I think that's when and of course that's where the first lady of wrestling went to shows. Blonde, used to be married to Eddie Gilbert.
Missy?
Yeah.
Very good.
She's from Tallahassee, and she used to go to wrestling shows there, and used to drive over to Atlanta to see Georgia wrestling, and so she comes from Tallahassee. He was a Tallahassee fan.
Well documented.
Yeah.
Well documented
by her in her book.
Wrestling business.
Yeah, it's in her book.
Yeah, exactly.
But she
in our day, folks, guys of a certain age will know that Missy was the deal back then, before the stables and whoever. I mean, before every other girl was one hotter than another. There was only one hot girl back then, and that was Missy.
That's right.
I must say.
Yeah. And
I don't know if
go ahead.
If that says more for Missy or less for the other ladies that were out there, but it was not a hot girl centric thing at the time. And
Right.
Missy was like the first one. She was the Rosa Parks of hot girls at ringside.
One more thing about your shirt, Florida, a lot of territories, I mean, Tennessee was this way. I mean, they put NWA on everything. They put it on the turnbuckle pads. They put it heavily on all the television shows they had an NWA logo. And I know that on the Florida show, it was put very prominently on there. Eddie was a big deal in the NWA. He was what you would call a wheel in the NWA.
Well, like they said at the beginning, at the top of the hour, and it stuck with me for the past 50 years, when you see this symbol, you are seeing the symbol of excellence in professional wrestling. And everybody knows that I am NWA for life. Florida born and bred, Jersey born, but Florida bred wrestling wise. Okay. And I appreciate you guys from the AWA, WWF. That's what makes the world go around. But if you guys didn't see Florida wrestling, a lot of people will say you missed professional wrestling.
It was very interesting, always was interesting to me, that, and we've talked about this many times, how, and we're going to talk about it with Steve in just a few minutes, but how sports-based, reality-based, legitimate Eddie wanted the product to be. And it was always fascinating to me that he almost gave more credence to branding it NWA than Championship Wrestling from Florida. I mean, they got equal billing, but like you say, the emphasis was put on, when you see this, it's the symbol of excellence, which is basically saying our wrestling is the shit, right?
And they happen to be correct. You know, it's like when WCW came out and said we wrestle, that's like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. But with Championship Wrestling from Florida, it was implied, and the product delivered on its promise. This is the symbol of excellence, and here's every great wrestler, booked by the greatest booker,
did you think
announced by the greatest announcer.
But I mean, we're partial because we're both from that 70s ilk, but did you think We Wrestle had as much oomph to it as what you just quoted about the symbol of excellence? I mean, it just it just didn't resonate with. I mean, it just didn't do anything for me.
It has much resonance as the Ruse turnbuckles. It was another abomination because you're supposed to wrestle. I mean, that's right there on the marquee, as Gordon Soley used to say. We're here for the wrestling. Wrestle.
And I always felt like they were trying to say more about their competitor than they were about themselves.
Exactly, because everything back then, you know, my friend Brian Solomon said a great thing on somebody's show, that he was actually more into the NWA or WCW and WWF in their early 90s struggling years than when everything started to heat up, 97, 98. And I feel the same way, because there was more wrestling actually happening in those companies at that time. As far as We Wrestle, no, it's just it shows you how far everything had fallen by then, where they actually have to say WWF is a clown show, We Wrestle. Here we're going to take away the mats and the moves and get back to basics, but it was too late. The toothpaste was out of the tube by then, and you can't go back to that. You can't work a leg in 1993.
I mean, the thing that bothered me was I already know there's 2 wrestling companies or 3 wrestling companies as a fan. Most fans, if you like wrestling, you're watching everything you possibly can. So you know there's other stuff. But the thing that bothered me was it just always seemed like they were way more focused on them and what they were doing. And they would throw that out there like we're really going to say something stinging about them because we're going to say We Wrestle, and then they'd put on a product that was trying to be that. Like, there was so much about it that was carbon copied. Like, if you're going to say We Wrestle, give that to me then. Don't give me big Josh and Firebreaker Chip. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is a big bone of contention with me and a big talking point of mine, which is the wrestling world had an opportunity to be true to itself and its roots. Imagine a world in which Crockett won the wrestling war, and then the nationwide audience was exposed to Barry Windham and Ric Flair, Midnight Express against Rock and Roll Express. They would have been educated to professional wrestling in a gladiatorial sportsman-like setting, as opposed to a glorified cartoon, which they became used to, which became de rigueur. Where the wrestling world blew it is they tried to compete with McMahon at his own game, and they never could. And everybody from their major competition, WCW at the time, all the way down to the teeniest of independent shows made the same mistake. We don't have any money, but we're going to try and replicate a WWF production. So all of a sudden, the heels and faces are not coming out of separate dressing rooms. We got to have a ramp now, because that's what they do on Raw, et cetera, et cetera. And every rinky-dink promotion, all the way up, had to replicate what they thought WWF thought wrestling should be. And so instead of sticking to their guns, they said, okay, this is what the fans want. This is the WWF product, and we're going to try and replicate it. And it was a losing proposition because you're going up against people who they took an offshoot of the product. All you had to do was stay with your product. We still might have had professional wrestling.
And that's what bothers me so much about it, because all of that gives us a narrative today about corporate people or corporate executives being involved in the wrestling business. And the problem was that the wrestling company did not, I mean, what Vince was doing is he was taking people with a mixture of wrestling people that had a background in wrestling and mixing them along with people who were very intelligent and highly skilled at the areas of the company that they needed to be skilled in. He had a highly functioning, really smart, talented team. Whereas it seemed like on the other side that had the stuff that we were hoping for, we got we got idiots. I mean, we got people that got in those roles of running the company that didn't understand the basics about business strategy, about what to do when you're in a competitive situation, about how to carve out a piece of the pie for yourself and super serve that audience. I mean, any person in the world can come in and make a cheap copy of something else.
Right.
That's not hard at all. But there's a saying in the corporate world that I come from, there's a saying, you can't out Walmart.
Right.
So don't even try. You're going to have to do something else that's very distinctive that the people that are your base core love. But it seemed like what we got a bunch of people that tried to run those people off as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a rant, you know.
No, and it's hard enough. It's hard enough to translate old-fashioned Southern wrestling, the comfort food of wrestling, if you will, into a national audience. But, you know, the closest that we've seen to it is when UWF was syndicated, when JCP was syndicated.
But here's my question about that, Howard. Why do you have to be a national audience? Like, why can't you take 3/4 of the country or 25% of the country? And you already had it, because Vince was not drawing in Texas to Florida and up to the Carolinas. He was not drawing there. And it took a long time for him to draw in St. Louis. Why can you take that part of the country and cordon it off and partition it off and go, these are the people that we're going to serve? There are enough major markets in these states, in this region, that like this product, that we are going to take this and we're going to defend it with everything we got. Why did they have to try to get the West Coast and the upper Midwest where the product didn't translate?
Right.
Why did it have to be? And this is what I run into this with people all the time. When you have an all or nothing mindset, we're either going to have the whole country or we're going to have nothing. And most of the time we ended up with nothing.
Right.
Instead of going, we're going to be true to ourselves and true to our base and true to our core, and we're going to take care of them, and we're not going to lose them. And then we'll see, as things progress, we'll see what happens from there. If there's a possibility that we can expand from there, we'll take advantage of it. If we can't, we'll just be happy with this. It's almost like the old proverb about the dog that has a nice bone in his mouth, and he's walking along, and there's a puddle of water, and he looks in the water and he sees a dog with a bone, and he wants to try to take the bone from that dog, and he loses his bone and he has nothing.
Yeah, but having said all that, look at the end game. It is everything is so segmented now.
It is now, but not in 1990.
But maybe he was thinking, I hate to give Vince this much credit, but maybe he was thinking so far ahead of the game.
He was. He was always so far ahead of everybody else in the wrestling business.
Well, let me just say this. think that McMahon or no, the internet would have destroyed professional wrestling. People say cable destroyed wrestling. If cable didn't do it,
It was
cable
just
might have
it was the next iteration of technology that did.
Yeah, because I'll let Vince off the hook for this one. I mean, he might have bastardized what we consider professional wrestling as far as in-ring product. But
Well, what
wrestling,
happened, in my opinion, what happened was cable television destroyed the territories. It
correct.
destroyed the geographical regions because people were able to see across lines now. But the
Right.
internet destroyed kayfabe.
There you go. And I mean, with the willing help of everyone involved in the wrestling business at the time,
Sure.
let's just be as inside as we can. Let's just do shoot angle after shoot angle, bastardize the whole entire thing within a couple of years, feast upon yourself as a business, be left with a mockery of what you once were. Now, even the people involved in the business, trickling all the way down to the fans, as Bob Smith said on his podcast, the fans don't even know what wrestling is supposed to be anymore.
Right.
So to make a clear connection between professional wrestling and sports entertainment is a fool's journey, because they're two different things, and you and I are on the same page about that.
No doubt.
And that's not even up for debate.
I mean,
Today,
you were around at the time, and I was around at the time. The newsletters didn't destroy kayfabe. They were just serving the fans like you and I that were just crazy about this stuff.
Mhm.
But the internet, that's where everybody got access. You
They're
know,
like, hey, you want to see how to make a blade? Look, you cut it here, you tape it here.
I mean,
Oh,
unless you went to
yes.
unless you went to a show or a convention or a conference where you connected with other fans, you wouldn't find out about the Torch or the Observer. I mean, there really
Yeah,
wasn't any way for you to find out. But when the
every area.
internet hit and everybody had access to access information, man, it got on fire then.
Well, I hate to be a name dropper here, but the great Gordon Soley said to me, I said, what do you make of all this? It's like everything's out in the open now. It was in 98 at the NWA 50th in New Jersey, and I spent a lot of time with Gordon at that convention. And he said, I love it. He goes, you know why? You know why they're so into it now? Because everyone's in on the secret. And I'm like, and you're okay with that? To Gordon Soley, no less, you know, the guardian of kayfabe through my whole entire life. He's like, yeah, I think it's great. So there you go. I mean, that's the wrestling business for you. If something's working, they even gave into their core beliefs at the very end of it. They're like, okay, we'll sell out the whole business. If that's what they want, it's working.
I think, and we'll get on with our guest, but I think at the core, I think the people in the territory era presented the product, even though there were suspicions and people wondered about it, and some people even thought they knew, and all of that. They didn't allow that to hinder the performance of the art. You know,
Yeah, like
even if
nobody,
they thought that there was a crowd of people in a town, and those people knew this wasn't, trying to think of what word I want to use.
legit
Well,
on the up and up.
it wasn't the cooperative. You know, that people knew that there was cooperation going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But that didn't cause the performance to give any less to it. You know, they still went out there and performed as if it was a sports-based presentation. And I think that came across to the audience because that helped the audience to buy into it, just like you would if you went to go see a Tom Cruise movie. Like, you know that it isn't real, that there's some other stuff going on here that's telling your brain that this is happening, but it's not really happening. But you're still into it and you're still experiencing it, even though the logic of it tells you that what I'm seeing in this movie is not actually happening, you know?
Yeah. This speaks to the importance of why the guys maintained their character 24/7, and Mil Mascaris arrogant man that he is, wore his mask even in front of the boys, all in the name of protecting the business and their livelihood. Because as a boy, what did I see of Ox Baker or Abdullah the Butcher? Big, scary man. Didn't know they were nice guys. Didn't know Ox Baker liked to paint his toes and sing opera. Big, scary guys who might kill you. That's all we knew. And for the majority of my adult life, that's all I knew. And all this insider stuff has taken away that enjoyment of being a mark from the people, and they have no concept of what it is to have some mystery about somebody that they're interested in. There's no mystery. Now it's like Seth Rollins will come to his house, to your house on his own time and explain to you how he's going to wrestle this match. You know, I mean, what more do you want?
Right.
The highlight of the show, the whole thing that drew you in was, oh my God, what's going to happen? We'll see you next week. And then you'd be there next week, like, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Or you would sit and you would wonder, I wonder what these guys are like away from the ring.
Exactly.
You don't have to wonder that now. They just, they just show you, which takes that magic you're talking about out of it.
Oh, I'm a monster on TV. Here's my wife and kids. Here's my DVD collection. You want to play some video games? Come on. I mean, it's just so basic. If I wanted to get over, I would not be seen complimenting my opponents or being a nice guy in public or a not nice guy in public, whatever the character may be. It is just basic wrestling 101. And I see so many of the kids not realizing this basic fact because they would rather trade the momentary dopamine rush of a like, hey, I'm working a show, complimenting your opponent or whatever, instead of letting the people buy into your character.
Right.
Raven did not do a shoot interview for like 5 years when he was on fire, when he was on top. He was one of the last holdouts in the era of shoot interviews. He's like, no, I'm not going to show you who I really am. I'm going to maintain the integrity of my character.
Because that's how I make my living.
And he knew that. And that's so obvious, and it should be, and it's not.
Right. Well, that's another thing. I mean, they aren't compensated. They're compensated no matter what. I mean, it doesn't matter if they, obviously there's levels and there's benefits to getting over, but it's not like it was where you were living and dying with your character, and your living and income was based on how well your character got over.
And I mean, you're taking your character everywhere. If you're Mil Mascaras or Austin Idol and you're traveling the world, you're not beholden to any promotion. If you fall out of grace with Eddie Graham or Paul Bosch, okay, I'm still Austin Idol. So you have to maintain yourself. You have to be Buddy Rogers at all times. I'm Buddy Rogers. I'm protecting myself. I'm protecting the business. And everybody lived by that code. You better believe it. And I mean, now it's like, hey, great match, Jaden Price. See you next week at the rec center. Hope we have another one. Come on. I mean, I don't even know what the word for it is.
Man, I love having these discussions with you. But I guess we better get on with our guest. What are you most looking forward to tonight with Steve Keirn?
Oh, my God. I can't emphasize it enough. To me, when I was a kid, as it comes out in the episode, I told Steve I found a lot of the baby faces bland because I really favor the heels and everything. But Steve Keirn was never bland. He was, as far as I'm concerned, he was the first cool baby face. Like Dusty was a force of nature. Of course he was cool, but he was out there. That was like Muhammad Ali in the flesh. But Steve, he might have done the same arm drags and arm locks and leg locks and hitting the ropes as everybody else on paper, but he put a little extra something into it, a little more aggression into everything he did, and it just stood out. And if you want to see excellence in professional wrestling, you watch a Steve Keirn squash from Florida, Georgia, Mid-Atlantic. You watch the fabulous ones in Memphis. And that's all I got to say. In the words of my friend Tyree Pride, once I see Steve Keirn, I don't got to see nothing else. I already seen enough wrestling to last me the whole night. And that's how we all feel about Steve Keirn. He's, you know, he might not, he's just, for us Florida guys, he's as good as it gets.
We're excited to bring Steve in here tonight as our special guest, and we're going to talk about him breaking in. We're going to talk about him getting stretched by Hiro Matsuda. We're going to talk about his finishing maneuver, which a lot of people may not remember what it was, but another wrestler who went on to become halfway famous took that finishing maneuver from Steve Keirn. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the big 1976 feud with Bob Roop and a whole lot more. It's just a great time, and we're excited to share it with you guys. Any words before we go to Steve?
I just think it's a beautiful thing, man, and everyone's going to love it.
Great. Let's welcome in our special guest tonight, Championship Wrestling from Florida, 1976, Steve Keirn. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel History Show. I'm your host, Tony Richards, coming to you live from the Richards Ranch in Western Kentucky. And tonight, I have my regular co-host for our Florida shows, Howard Baum, here tonight, along with our special guest, as we're going back through his career, especially in 1976, Mr. Steve Keirn's with us tonight. Steve, welcome aboard, man.
Well, thank you guys for having me, man. I appreciate it.
All right, Howard, how are you tonight, brother?
Man, what an incredible thing. This is another one of those full circle moments because I don't know if Steve knows this about me, but I came down here in 75, started watching in 76. And, you know, let me tell you a little story, just kick things off here, and then we'll let you guys have at it. We had a little technical difficulty. Steve is not exactly the fabulous one at internet dial-up and whatnot, but
I am retired.
Hey, you're Steve Keirn, man.
That's
we
it.
worship you down here. So we're going to get
on.
on into this. I made some little notes so I don't make a fool of myself here. Let me just tell a little story that you're going to think is about me, but it's not. It's going to segue right into Steve, and it's going to go right from there. And then a minute and a half from now, you guys can have it, and I'm just going to chime in like a little spice. I was a photographer back in the olden days, and I happened to shoot in 1985 at the Mid-South Coliseum my favorite wrestler in my favorite tag team in my favorite match that I ever shot in my entire life. And that would be Steve and Stan, the Fabs, against Boyd and Morgan, the Sheepherders.
Oh, man.
And for my own
That
personal
wouldn't
world
be my
title,
favorite.
as a personal victory to myself, Ian Douglas says Steve Keirn himself wants your photo for his book. And there it
Exactly.
is. Mid-South Coliseum, 1985. And I ain't lying, I ain't working. My favorite match I ever got to shot ringside, because I like when the action gets hot and heavy. I'm like the Steve Keirn of photographers. And if it's a boring match, they might come out a little fuzzy, whatever. When the action's going and the blood is flying, I call it war zone photography. And that was the pinnacle of an example of that. I had to get out of, I mean, those guys were killing each other. Fabs, Sheepherders, Moondogs, all that stuff. That's my jam. And I just want to say that as a kid, a Florida, South Florida, 70s kid, I got to promote this book. I got to tell you, I think it's like my favorite book that has ever come out
Thank
in
you.
wrestling. And I'll tell you why. A lot of the big names don't name names. Steve brings you right into the dressing room, into the scenarios of what it was really like to work during my two favorite eras, 70s Florida and 80s Memphis. Everyone knows those are my two favorite promotions. Maybe not Steve's, but that's about all I have to say right now, and I'm going to leave it to you guys, but I want to just say one more thing. 1989, backstage at the PWF at the War Memorial Classic Championship from Florida building. I'm hanging out with Tyree Pride, who I was previously friends with. Steve Keirn's walking around, and I go, Steve Keirn, man. And Tyree goes to me, man, once I see Steve Keirn, I don't need to see no more wrestling. I can go home. And that's how we feel about you, man. Always been a favorite, the consummate pro.
I'm humbled, Howard. That I appreciate all those kind words. I mean, I was in my heyday when you were talking. I had already gone through that development of being a green guy. I carried that on though. In those days, we always went with the theory that for your first 5 years, you're green, even though you're wrestling 7 nights a week. And like in the Georgia territory, it's 10 times with 3 different TVs. But you're doing it so much, and your opponents are changing and everything. And I just, and when I hit about 4 years in there, I got that opportunity, I think, with Bob Roop. And then I got into like main event stuff and violence. I mean, one of the things Eddie Graham instilled in me was making it look real. It was like we were like magicians. You knew it wasn't real. If you ask everybody in the audience, is wrestling real? No. Wrestling real? No. Wrestling real? Then if you go, have you ever seen anything that looked like they were really pissed or whatever? Yeah, man, I remember this one time. Yeah, man, I remember. And that's what I was taught. It was a very kayfabe business at the time. Heels and baby faces didn't ride. There's no rehearsals. You showed up at the town. And you got it from a referee, your finish, and he comes across with 3 finishes. I can remember getting in the ring and going, hey, Harley, did you just get the same finish I got? I'm not sure if this is the right one because I'm winning the world title. And he goes, no, that's not
That's
yours.
not the way. That's not it. No.
Anyway.
The Florida product, I always thought a great word for it was legitimate.
Yeah.
Like it just came across as legitimate. Howard and I have talked on our previous shows about how if you would have taken the wrestling in Florida and put it on Wide World of Sports, Gordon Soley and the product would have fit right in. Because the Wide World of Sports had different things, different types of sports. It was an anthology type show. And if you would have had a wrestling match from Florida in there, it would have been seamless.
Well, if you picked the right one.
Yeah, that's true.
There was some holes in the matches.
Yeah, there was a little gaga, not as much as in Tennessee, but
yeah, I saw. I mean, the smarter I got by experience. My mentor was Jack Brisco, Harley, Terry Funk. Those guys really took time with me, and I really feel like it was because that. My dad being a prisoner of war, they knew I'm a war child there with my dad still in Vietnam and things, and then going through 7.5 years without him coming into the business. I was adopted by all of them. And every one of them told me the exact same thing, man. Said, Steve, when you're done with the first match, I know you're coming out to that new music, the national anthem. When you're done, don't take a shower. Turn right back around and watch every match. And watch what the main event does, especially how they emotionally move an audience that's on semi-half belief and reality. And watch them why they get paid the most. Study those guys, but watch every match because you might pick up something out of a match. And that's really was my education. I mean, when I first started, I don't want to bore you guys, and if I cut off, it's because my battery's dead from trying to find you. But when I first started to get into wrestling here in Florida, it wasn't the same as it became later or for other territories. I was friends with Mike Graham. I was friends with Eddie. And when he said, you want to wrestle, I was going, no, because I'd been picking up Bill Watts and Terry Funk and Dory Funk and Harley and all these guys for a year or so when I got my driver's license. And I saw them all beat up. And I'm pretty. I don't want to look like them. So whatever everybody else is saying, oh, it's all fake. I'm going, yeah. Well, I don't want to be a wrestler. And I told Eddie, nah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. When I tried college, flunked out, come home, I want to be a wrestler. But I was getting to this point. He took me to Sportatorium and turned me loose with Hiro Matsuda, Brisco, Bob Roop, and some others, and they just stretched my ass every day. And it wasn't very long, like 2-hour workout or whatever, but it's 190 degrees in that Sportatorium. And I'm thinking, what am I doing? And I had to do these squats, 500 squats or squats to a deck of cards. And I'm going, oh my God. And then push-ups. Then I had to actually wrestle Hiro. And Hiro, My sister could beat me at the point I was at. And it went on for 6 months. And my mom was the only one at home. And when I come home, I'd have mat burns on my nose, my elbows. And my mom would say, honey, that wrestling, I thought it was all fake. And I looked at my mom and said, so did I. I said, I don't know what I'm learning. I said, but I'm too embarrassed to quit. I mean, I thought, well, how am I going to quit? How am I going to go in there and say, listen, I've decided to go against this. This don't look like what I see. And then all of a sudden, Eddie, just out of the clear blue, come in and said, kid, it's time for you to go to work. And I didn't learn but how to hit the ropes, headlock, a takeover. And I went to work and I wrestled guys old enough to be my grandpa in spot shows all over Florida, like Arcadia or Leesburg, or, just all up and down. And I'd do 10 or 15-minute Broadways, which is a draw. Mm-hmm. And so we go through this, and these old guys would be going, slow down, kid, do this, do that. And even the referee, like Stu Schwartz, sitting right in front of me, he would tell me, fight back, you're dying. Come alive. And so the education was totally different. I went to work in front of an audience with just a handful of moves and then learned all of it really in the ring I drug that 5-year green thing out because when I make a mistake, I said, man, I'm still green. Of course, about 10 years into it, when I'm with Bob Orton Jr. or somebody in the Omni, Kevin Sullivan, he used to go like this when I'd hit him. He'd cringe, and it was hard to not hit him in the ear because he didn't like the way I hit him. So anyway, I didn't want to run off.
As you're working those spot shows with those older guys, I'm sure your adrenaline was going nuts.
Well, it was. And then plus there's a handful of people there. My first match was with Chris Markoff in Arcadia. And, there was like maybe 30 people in there. Later on in my career, after I got so comfortable in the ring, it was like my backyard. I'd go to a spot show, sometimes in Tennessee, sometimes in Florida, whatever. And if there's no people, not a whole lot of people, I'd say, hey, would you all mind all sitting over here on this one side? I mean, because you guys being over there, and you guys being over there, and two of you up in there. I said, come on all down together here. I mean, it
Sure.
was like working at a highlight fontan. Howard could understand that. Miami Beach, we worked at a highlight fontan. And it's like one-sided audience. They're right straight out like watching highlight. But it's a hard crowd to work.
Even worse than that was the Sunrise Theater, right?
Oh, yeah, same deal. It's like you're on a stage. You know what I mean? And so you've got a different aspect of an audience. The perfect scenario is like a squared circle. You're in a square, and it's a circle all the way around you. And that's why it was called that, I think. I'd ask Gordon Sullivan, but I had to dig him up to ask him. So I'm pretty sure that's what he'd say.
Well, it's conducive. You want the fans on all four sides. It's just conducive. It's not meant to be seen like a play on the stage. It took away from it so badly,
Yeah,
and
it did.
And Tampa had that too. That people ran Tampa Highlight, I think. But
no, we didn't run. We never ran highlight here. We do it in Ocala though. We'd run a highlight building there. The last exit going into Ocala on 75 there was a highlight fontan. We went there several times.
Well, you spent 75 in Georgia and then up in North Carolina in a tag team with Tiger Conway Jr. And then when you came back to Florida, there was another young guy there in Florida that would later be known as Bruiser Brody, but he was Frank Goodish back in those late 75, early 76. Did you work with Frank at all?
Yeah, I worked with him when he was Frank Goodish. I mean, me and Mike Graham were a tag team at that time. And I don't remember who they tagged him up. Is that phone call on my phone call messing this up? No.
No.
Okay. So anyway,
I think they put him with King Curtis.
He was Frank Goodish. He wasn't Bruiser Brody yet. And I didn't bully him, but I was stiff. Me and Mike kept tagging out on his arm, and we'd bend over, we'd boot him in the chest. I mean, just working, but kind of stiff. And that was when, before he got his education. The next time I worked with him was in Minneapolis, and it was me and Stan had gone up there, and he was brutal. I mean, he came around, we were walking around the ring one time. We had bow ties and suspenders on, we're walking around the ring, slapping hands. He come up out of nowhere, coming to the ring and come right at me, and from behind booted me in the back. My suspenders flew off. I thought a mark had jumped in and hit me with a chair. I thought, what was that? I turned around and it was Bruiser Brody, and he had a whole different style now, man. He was been in Japan with Stan Hansen, who Stan Hansen is my very first tag team partner. So Stan Hansen and him had ruled in Japan, but stiff. I mean, really stiff.
Well, they were setting you up, you and Mike up for a program with Roop and Orton Jr. for the tag championship.
Right.
But you had some matches with Orton Sr. and Jr. before that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How was Senior Orton Sr. in the ring?
He was great, but he was just, he was too loose. I mean, he was he was mature. That's the best way for me to put it. He wasn't like Bobby. Bobby was aggressive as hell. Bobby gave me this crooked lip. He drove his lip through my teeth in Dade City one time when he put me on the ropes and hit the other ropes, and he said, "Don't move." And all I heard was "move." And when he come running the other way, I turned around and I ate his knee. But one time with Bob Orton Sr., when they were together, I was going to get color, and I carry my blade in my mouth. So I got my blade out of my mouth, and I'm ready to get color. And Bobby Orton Jr. runs me in the turnbuckle. When he did, the blade shot out of my hand. And I'm going, oh, man. Eddie's on the rail. Eddie Graham's sitting up on the rail here at the Fort Homer Hesterly Armory. And I look up and I see Eddie, and he remembers every bit of whatever he laid out for a finish. And I'm going, he's not going to see blood. What am I going to do? So I told Bobby, I said, bust me open the hard way. Well, he snap-married me, twisted my hair, and started punching me in the forehead. He said, your head's not coming open. And I go, I know, man, you're bruising. I'm out getting knots all over my head, but they ain't bleeding. So I said, run me into your dad's knee. And so his dad didn't wear knee pads. And so he told Dad, give me your knee. And he put his knee up. I run into Orton Sr.'s knee with my head so hard trying to bust it open that I knocked him off the apron.
Dang.
And it almost killed him. He hit the steel rail, everything. And then later on, they're going, what was wrong with you? I said, and then when I came back up, Eddie looked at my forehead, and it looked like a golf course. And he's going like, where's your blade, kid? And I go, I lost it in the excitement. Anyway, stories, war stories.
Oh, man. How good
Tremendous.
was, I mean, Bobby Jr. went through that with Coach John Heath's school of wrestling. How good was he from the get-go?
Oh, man, he was awesome. Everybody that I worked with, I don't care what territory, they were all great workers. And it's because we're doing it every night. Now, some were better than others, and there were some that I really didn't want to work with. But at the same time, they were all good workers. I learned from everybody else. Wrestling was like school, and you start in elementary school and you progress up. Well, you can go to college and just kind of hang out in the middle of the card, or you can go to med school and go to the highest you can get. And it was like a learning lesson. When I'd teach these people that I had working under me in FCW, and when I was running the developmental for Vince, I'd tell them, I say, what you're going to get is the idea is I say, pick out 5 of your favorites from another era and pick out something about the way they work. Steal one thing from each guy, and you're going to be a new creation, but out of old successful material. And I mean, they look at me like, man, this guy, what's wrong with this guy? He got too many chair shots. But, to me, my job was to teach young men and women at FCW how to get along, because it's not always about your talent. Sometimes it's just about your personality. Being a well-liked person in that dressing room was very important. If you come in with an attitude, you got a target on your back because somebody's not going to like your attitude. Right. You know what I mean? So be humble. You know, always start when your conversation with your opponent for that night is, what would you like to do? Is there anything you want to do? Are you hurt? Do you have anything wrong with you, like your back, your knee, your neck, your arm, anything? No? Okay. Is there anything you really want to do? Not try. I don't want you to try nothing tonight, but what would you like to do to get you over? And so anyway.
You know, the thing I think is great about that advice is if they would do that, there's so much great stuff from the old days that isn't even done anymore. You would be an amazing revelation now if you did some of it. Some of it hasn't been seen in so long. It would be so new now if they did that.
Abdominal stretch. I mean, you know, one of the things that I disagreed, I mean, and I worked for Vince for 14 years, and I was an agent and ran the developmental for him. And it's his business. It's not my business. But one of the things I disagreed with was taking the referees out of the action, pulling them out and making them really officials. Referees were so vital during the 60s. Well, I don't know about the 60s. I was in high school. During the 70s and 80s. I mean, you know, if I was working with a guy that couldn't work, I'd start working with a referee. If I was a heel, you know, I'd go to the referee and have him, hey, catch me. I'm going to hold the ropes. And then when he catches me, push me. I'll push you back. Then push me on my butt. I mean, you know, it was the guy I'm working with may not know what's going on, but, you know, you got to keep going. You're on the stage.
Steve, so did you ever work with Leo Garibaldi?
No, I didn't.
When he when he booked a territory, he also refereed the main event. And,
did he?
Yeah, and so picking up what you're talking about there, where the referee is such a vital component to it. I mean, I've talked to Bobby Simmons so many times about it.
Well, they just took the magic of that era out. I shouldn't say that because they're very successful.
Oh, sure.
There's nobody that can argue with the success of the businesses now. And I mean, you know, across the board, I don't know. I don't really keep up. You know, it's well, almost like being a plumber and then wanting to go see your neighbor put a toilet in after you retired. You know what I mean?
Well, Howard and I've talked about this many times. I mean, it's just a different business now. I mean, I don't even think it's comparable. It's not that it's good or bad or indifferent. It's just different. He just, Vince, he innovated and augmented and changed some things, and fans today don't know any different. But we do, because we know what it was like then and what it's like now. But it's different business.
The difference was 52 times a year, I'd be in the same city. 52 times every week going to the same city. And it was repetitive, one right after another. And then when I worked for Vince, I'd go through the towns maybe once a year, and some of them not even coming back the next year. I mean, you know, and so it's like the talent that I helped with now. I don't ever take credit for all the people that come out of FCW because it was a joint effort. Not one person can train somebody. You have to have a variety of input. You have to have knowledge from different things, and then you have to get your feet wet. You got to be the one that critiques yourself. But with all that being said, the guys now, they don't put the effort. I went to the matches here in Tampa a couple of times, and talent that I had dealt with, I went in the back and I said, you know, no offense, but I saw this 8-man tag last time I was at a show you guys did. It was the exact same match, right down to the moonsault and the finish. And they go, yeah, we do the same match over and over again. You know, we get one that really works and we do it. And so to me, that's not working. That's kind of a different scenario. Working was just walking out there. We had separate dressing rooms. We went out there. never even spoke to some of the guys that I worked with, and I didn't speak with them other than them telling me to slow down or loosen up. You know what the most misused phrase in wrestling is? I'm sorry.
It's better to apologize than
I
ask
was
permission,
famous.
right?
Yeah, I was famous for that. They go, "Oh my God, you hurt me." I go, "Oh, I'm sorry." I mean,
Well, Steve,
Go ahead, Howard. No, go ahead.
Steve, one of the things I've always appreciated about you is that we had a lot of baby faces, white meat baby faces here in Florida, obviously. And I'm not going to name any names, but you always brought an extra intensity, a go forward aggressiveness that no other babyface had down here. Like Dusty was off in the stratosphere. And there's two kinds of wrestling that attracted me in the beginning. You had your Dusty, King Curtis, Superstar Graham, Ox Baker, Joe Luduc on top, all these like monsters, right? Like a Godzilla versus King Kong.
right,
But I also appreciated the wrestling.
right.
And when Jeff Quartz was down here and Gordon Nelson was down here in the openers, and once in a while you'd work one of those guys if you were in between programs.
Yeah.
And that was all I needed to see. That was tremendous. Steve Keirn and Jeff Quartz was better than anything that was going to come after that, because there was so much technical wrestling in there. And while I'm saying this, I want to, a lot of these baby faces, all you guys basically did the same stuff, right? But Steve did it with so much more intensity. And Steve was my guy because of that. Not really Mike Graham, the Briscoes. It's blasphemy, but I was always really more into the heels because that's where the excitement was. But I also I really appreciated really good wrestling. And Steve brought that, man, like nobody else. I mean, he laid it in. I would always tell people.
You
when I
know,
was a kid,
you know, Howard, I invented that.
I love that.
You know that I invented that forearm, and you know that Eddie had given me the sleeper hold for a finish here in Florida. So it'd be like, I had a secret weapon the whole time, and that's what I'd use. And I was watching TV, and I see this guy, Dick Butkus, a football player, do a Prestone antifreeze commercial. And what it was somebody threw him a Prestone antifreeze can. He catches it, and he looks, and it's him throwing a forearm right in the center of a football thing where it catches the guy under the chin, and the guy's feet come up in the air. And I go, whoa. And he says, "My job's plugging holes."
I remember that.
And so on TV, working with somebody, I tried it out, right? And clothesline for me was not one of my moves because that was for like a big muscle, like a road warrior. So I hit him with that forearm coming off of my feet. And Eddie, when I would come back in the dressing room, Eddie goes, "The sleeper is over. You're going to use that forearm for your finish from now on." I mean, Howard, you picked it, but, there's like Terry Taylor told me, "Oh, I stole your forearm." Manny Fernandez, "Oh, I stole your forearm when I went to Carolina." It's not really stealing it, it's using it. But I know that I'm the inventor of that, and I don't claim anything else. I mean,
and Tito, but
Yeah.
nobody did it like Steve Keirn, people.
Right.
And I always say this about a lot of guys, Steve, is that a lot of guys maybe more famous nationwide for a certain era of their life.
Right.
But people did not see you in 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, Florida.
Tito did. Tito came to Florida.
Hey,
Tito
nobody can imitate.
Listen, I don't mean to interrupt you, but Tito came in and used Ricky Steamboat's real name.
Yeah, that's right. Richard Blood.
Richard Blood. And Eddie wouldn't let him use it because it goes, Dick Blood. That sounds like a phony ass wrestler name.
Right.
Anyway, but Tito used it. And when Tito left, Tito had gotten that forearm from watching me. Nobody was allowed to do it at that time but me because it was my finish. But when they left, they all used it. And I would have done the same thing. I mean,
Not
So,
like Kern though, but let me tell you the greatest use of the flying forearm smash. Okay,
okay.
like here's Howard Baum educating Steve Keirn. Everybody.
No, I'm
Um,
ready.
no, man. Okay, so the best is when Mike Graham has a guy. By the way, do you endorse the term? Um, what do they call the jobbers? Enhancement talent. Do
No.
you endorse the term enhancement talent? Because I'm old school and I call it jobbers. I'm not in the business or anything, but Don Serrano was a
Well,
jobber in Florida.
well, Barry Horowitz got that kind of handle and all of that. And the thing about it is the I don't really call them that. I call them enhancement guys because I think that's almost insulting them. I mean, if you call me a jobber, I think you're trying to insult me. And I did as many jobs as anybody, especially when I first started, but that was part of your education. And it was also part of your acceptance in that dressing room because if they knew when they come up to you and said, "Hey kid, we need you to put this guy over," and you go, "Yes, sir, whatever they want. What do you want me to do?" When you answer like that, instead of that old poo-poo face, what? That guy? I'm gonna
No,
put him over.
I don't mean a guy. I mean, when you're a fan and you're educated to the fact
Right.
that certain people are never going to win. And I think if a fan knew the term at that time, they go, "That guy's a jobber." In
Yeah,
other
of course they
words,
would. They know
in
it
other words,
now.
Don Serrano against Bruiser Brody on TV. Don Serrano is a jobber in this. Okay, so as a
I thought you meant like in Tennessee, like Pat Hutchinson.
Oh,
so well, okay, so
boy, you
in
guys are
deference to
getting
Steve
heat with
Keirn,
these guys.
in deference, but I really want to make this point because it's a great one to put Steve over. In deference to Steve Keirn right now, I will retire the term jobber. I will start using enhancement talent. But here's what brings us around to this. My favorite thing as a kid, Mike Graham has the guy in a figure four. Then the guy who's in the figure four, his partner, the other enhancement talent, comes in. And I'm like, oh, here it comes. And here comes Steve from the third row across the ring. Bam! And I felt so sorry for the enhancement guy every time because nobody laid it in like Steve Keirn. And I knew that as a kid. And I knew that all the way through
Thanks.
my career of watching him.
Well, let me tell you what that forearm led to. That forearm led to a point in my career from using it so much that I couldn't straighten my right arm. It would only go 3/4 of the way out. And really, when you noticed it the most, Dennis Knight was a student of mine in the early 90s or 89. I started him. And he would always make fun of me by putting his hands up over there and one's bent, one's straight. And he goes, "Look, Steve Keirn." And my elbow, where the joint is, what happened was I broke little small bone chips off over the years throwing it, and they lodged in the joint. So when it would go to open straight out, like right straight out, the bones would stop it, those that were wedged in there.
Wow,
And,
you had spacers in your bone joints.
I did not even notice it until I was in Tennessee and I was in the dressing room and I was throwing a racquetball against the wall, bouncing it and trying to catch it. And I'm going, "Wait a minute, Mom, don't straighten." And then I'm going, "Wait a minute." And I started freaking out. And when I'd bench press, I'd notice my arm, I'm having to adjust my shoulder. I went to Vanderbilt. They operated, took the bone spurs out, but they put me in a cast and it froze up again. And so I stayed with that till I came back to Florida and I had another operation again. And this guy that operated on me here in Tampa took the bone chips out, but he didn't put me in a cast. He put me in a perpetual motion machine that opened my arm all the way and closed my arm. And I'd have to be on that for so many hours a day. And it's better, but at the same time, that forearm, it really, and some guys, Ric Flair hated it. I mean, he'd tell me, he says, "Not the forearm." And I'm going like, "Yeah, the forearm." I said, "It's better than that bump over the top, and then you go into the corner and me slamming you off the corner." I said, "I can call your match blindfolded." Anyway, but he hated that forearm, or hated it when I gave it to him anyway.
Steve, you were practically a member of the Graham family. I mean, you spent so much time with Mike and so much time over there and all, and you guys were a tag team. But then before you got the belts, they switched you over to Bob Backlund as a partner. Why'd they switch you guys?
Well, they were bringing Bobby in from Minnesota, and Bobby was a tremendous athlete, a great amateur, everything. But he was like, I guess I could explain it like Lex Luger, muscly and robotic. They're so tight from working out and muscling, and it's not like over muscular, it's just a tightness. And they weren't fluid motion. Your body has to be able to bend every way and be more like a rubber. And so they decided they wanted to put him with me and groom him. And I there's a big story that goes with all of this. And it's because that Vince Sr. called me, and I'd never even talked to the guy before. And he says, I want to bring you up. And he says, I'm going to send you a belt, and I want you to take it to New Japan Pro Wrestling and drop it to Fujinami. After that, I'm going to bring you up here, and I'm going to team you up with Andre the Giant. You're going to do the loops and everything, and we're going to try to get you over as the young babyface kid with your dad, war hero, and all that. So back then, I didn't know anything about New York or whatever. All I knew it was big cities. I mean, big cities. And I wasn't used to that. I was comfortable in the South, working Florida, Georgia, Carolinas, Tennessee. People were nice to you. When you stop and say, hey, man, do you know how to get to the Coliseum? They go, sure. Hey, buddy, just go on down this road, that road. Hey, man, I'll tell you what.
Just follow me over there.
Yeah, follow me over there. And when you go to New York, because Dusty and I went up there twice. Vince Sr. brought us up there twice. Well, him more, but I went twice. When I went there, people were just like, hey, you know how to get to Madison Square Garden? Buy a map. I go, what do you mean buy? That's the kind of response you got. And I didn't really want to go. When I was in Japan, I really got into ribbing Freddie Blassie because I didn't get along with him. He was so arrogant on the bus that I started ribbing him. By the time we came back, Kevin Sullivan, before he died, he would tell this story because he heard Eddie Graham and Vince having a bet that they could get that Vince could get Bob Backlund over. And Eddie goes, you could take Keirn right now. He's already primed. He's gone through some angles. Dad's a war hero, legitimate, a shoot. That you can run with him, and he's going to make it. And he goes, well, I want a shooter because I got some shooters like Iron Sheik and some guys up here, and I want him to respect him. And I'm not a shooter. I'm not,
I always heard he wanted a Brisco, kind of somebody like Jack.
Yeah, well, he did, and that's why he wanted Bobby, and he took Bobby. And so, the whole thing is everybody's always asking me, were you upset? I go, no, I was happy because you know what? Dusty and Eddie hung every belt they had in Florida on me. I was the half of a tag team champion. I was the Florida champion 5 times. I had the brass knucks champ, and I even wrestled against the Missouri Mauler to get it, who was like really stiff. And so I was happy where I was at. And Bobby went and he did a fantastic job, and he had a great run and all of that. But when I worked in New York, I didn't really like the style. And one thing about wrestling is where you go, you got to do their style.
Right.
I mean, you got to change like a chameleon. And when I went there, the guys bitched about me being stiff, and the ropes were 20 feet now instead of 18. And they were real ropes with no recoil. And I loved to hit the ropes hard, but I'd go out into the audience there. And so everything was against it there. And staying in my little domain was where I was comfortable, so.
Moving you guys together was part of that whole preparation process for Bob. Yeah.
Sure was. I mean, Bobby was a great guy. I mean, I just sent a picture to somebody that posted a picture of Bobby. I sent a picture of me and Bobby with a tag belt. It said great, I mean, a good man. Oh, and then Tito responded to that. No, great man. I'm going, okay, a great man. Well, whatever. I was trying to give him a compliment. What the hell?
Well, I think a lot of times bookers get credit for things that wrestlers come up with, and maybe even so vice versa sometimes. But this whole thing with Bob Roop, that was your idea, right?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And I went to my dad before I even approached that idea because that was serious stuff. And once we got rolling, once that angle went, it was so real. All of these buildings were filling up, and people had their military uniforms on. I mean, they were coming fully dressed, and if they were not in the military for years, whatever they could put on that looked military, they came. And Bobby had so many death threats. Bob Roop got faced with somebody in a parking lot with a gun, and all different kinds of things. They cut his tires.
And for people, you need to get Steve's book and read it. And for those that don't know, this was a classic angle in July of 1976. It was the bicentennial year. Everybody was stars and stripes in the United States. And Steve's dad had been a POW in Vietnam. They used a newsreel of him returning home and all of that. And Steve went to his dad and told him his idea to get his permission. And he's like, hey, after what I've been through, like, this is, you do it, right?
Yeah, he did. Anything to help you up, kid. And it did. I mean, it gave me my first real angle. And once you made money for a promoter, back then there was the National Wrestling Alliance, and all these men would go visit each other, and they would talk about their talent. And when you can honestly talk about me and say, kids putting asses in seats, man. I don't know if it's the angle. I don't know if it's the, reputation. I don't know if he's just got it. Whatever it is, we're doing business. And Dusty, to his dying day, would defend me when somebody would say something about, oh, nobody could draw in Florida but Dusty. Dusty said, oh, yeah? Steve Keirn, man, he can draw. Give me the right angle, and he's going to put asses all over the place, baby. But
in the middle of all this patriotic 1976 stuff, I mean, right. Roop's out there making fun of your dad, making fun of you, right. and talking about how he was a veteran. Roop was a veteran.
Exactly.
So yeah. So, and he got death threats over it.
Oh yeah, all kinds of them. I mean, we're right by MacDill Air Force Base. This is Central Command. This base, my dad was a fighter pilot. He was stationed right here. So we're right on top of the military here in Tampa, but it didn't matter where we went. I mean, it was all American. And Bobby, what he did was he got on there bragging about being in the military. And then he also said about my dad, he said that as for Steve Keirn's dad, I think he's a coward for being captured and not escaping after so many years, or maybe a few other extras parts in there, but that's pretty much close. And I'm on the way. I'm coming from the dressing room.
You exploded onto the set, man. I mean,
you know what? That was the motivation for Hulkster to want to get in the wrestling business. He was going to high school with me, Terry Boland. He's sitting right there in the Sportatorium when I come around that corner, and I went over that desk after Roop. I hit the bone that's on the outside of my ankle on the top of Gordon's desk because it was a lot higher than I thought diving over it. And then in the whole mean league, Bob always thought that I was crying because of my ankle, but I got emotionally into my interview because my interviews generally sucked. I mean, there were such boring interviews because I'm following like Jack Brisco and guys that, they went out there and they spoke simple and they didn't knock anybody. And that's not saying like my old opponent or bald opponent or fat opponent or whatever, because you're insulting people in the audience.
Well, I talked to Bob last year in Waterloo, Iowa at the Tragos Hall of Fame. I had a chance to sit with him because I wanted to tell him, man, when he and Bob Orton Jr. came up to Kentucky to ICW, I mean, they were the guys that I was going to see Of course, I was going to see the Jarrett shows, but then I was going to ICW, and I was going because of those two guys. But he was telling me that when this was going on, he said a guy pulled a gun on him in Miami.
Sure did.
Over this.
Yeah, he sure did. I mean, I don't know the whole story, but I've seen him in a couple of autograph signings and talked to him, and he told me back then, the heels and baby faces didn't ride together. We didn't have the same dressing rooms, so we didn't really know that much about each other. I mean, sometimes when you're riding like between Tampa and, let's say, Lake Wales, and then on to Yeehaw Junction, there's like 100 miles of just open stretch, and you'd stop, and some guys would be peeing or drinking a beer or whatever, and you get to talk a little bit then, but it wasn't a personal relationship, so you really didn't know that much about them.
I mean, the way I kind of look at programs and angles is, how far the heat goes. I mean, before the month was over, you guys had done Miami, and you had done a steel cage match in Tampa where you beat him in Tampa, which is usually the blow-off for a feud. But he keeps his heat for another 2 months after that.
Yeah, they just, once it got going, one of the secrets to them using that angle was Dusty, because at Eddie, the owner of the territory, would have never gone for that. But he had gone to Australia to work with Jim Barnett over there in Australia on something. And when he comes back, his territory is on fire. And there I am, and there's the angle. And it was so successful. Then Eddie got into it, and he started adding matches like Texas Death Match, Lights Out Match, whatever. I mean, like any kind of gimmick name you could come for.
You guys had a Lights Out Lumberjack match.
Yeah, anything to jazz it up. When I first started running FCW here in Florida, my talent was like Drew McIntyre, Sheamus, Roman Reigns, Charlotte Flair, all of these people, but those names didn't mean anything. So what I did was I did old school, and I booked the territory, but I wrote out the cards that they would put up in posters and stuff, and I put gimmick matches. I didn't put names, because people will pull up to a card like on a telephone pole at a stop sign and read it and go, wrestling's coming here to Leesburg. Okay, well, who's on the card? Oh, no, I don't know, but they got a steel cage match. They got a 20-man battle royal. They got a 4-man tag. They got mixed man and woman. They got a girl bikini contest. And nobody worried about the names. And they got educated watching these young talents. And, we had really good houses, but it wasn't because they were drawn. By the time they got to the point where the fans here in Florida got used to them or so, boom, they got pulled up. And I mean, all of a sudden, the people from the crowds were coming to me and going, hey, wow, that was pretty cool. Kofi Kingston, he's doing really good. And we just used to watch him here. I mean, Kofi was one of the first ones up.
The thing about Florida always was the layers that were involved with everything. Like, not only were you guys having this amazing singles program, but you also had that tag thing going with you and Bobby against Roop and Orton, and you had that going at the same time. And I always thought in the 80s in Dusty's booking in the Carolinas, it was like that was how he was taught to book, because he had that same kind of multi-layer.
He learned it all from Eddie.
Yeah, those multi-stories going on at the same time, and then having him involved in your feud.
Yeah, Eddie was highly respected between his peers, and the talent and all of that. I mean, Eddie was one of those guys that was just an old tough redneck, and he had stole the territory from
Cowboy
Letro, yeah,
Cowboy Latrell.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know all of that stuff when I started, but over the years I learned. I mean, like you said earlier, that if you read my book, I mean, both of them are just a history of what happened in wrestling. And I don't embellish stuff and try to make myself out to be something more than a soldier. I'm just a soldier.
Right.
I was one of those guys that didn't have any family connections, no political connection. I just got opportunities because I could either take a licking and keep ticking, or it was like, hey, let's try it. This guy's made some things happen. So And wrestling is kind of simple. You throw stuff against the wall, and if it sticks, you do it. But if it don't, the one thing I never wanted to be the main event when I'm in my first 4 or 5 years, and the reason was that I kept, the common thing is come in the dressing room and somebody go, "Who's on top?" There's nobody out there, and I didn't want to be that guy.
Well, Bob said it was one of his career highlights, and he said the thing that made it was you. And because you were just a really unselfish, talented guy, you sold great, and you knew how to read the crowd. And so he was very complimentary of you. I'll just give one more thing here and ask you to comment on. And then Howard, I'm sure, has got a couple of things. But Roop, then after you guys finish your program or whatever, Roop sort of gets shifted over to the Brisco brothers, and you get shifted over to Jody Hamilton. Yeah, and you won the Florida Southern Heavyweight title from Jody. What was working with Jody like?
Jody was cool. Jody was like a big man. I mean, just a big bear of a man, solid. And he made movements, and he was very light on his feet. And, he could come for an arm drag. If he told me to arm drag him or something, I mean, here these guys close 300 pounds. He goes sailing over me. But when you did something that he wasn't excited about, he would put you in your place pretty quick. And when I was in Atlanta one time, and this was not in a reference to that, but I was in Atlanta and I first started. Ricky Gibson had been my partner in working
another
for
talented
guy. Yeah, Lee Fields. And that's I learned a lot from Ricky, because once they teamed me up with him, I watched him and studied him. He was tremendous. But anyway, so now here I come real green to Atlanta, and Ricky takes me out the first night, right? Said, "Well, we got to get you initiated here in the territory. This is a bigger territory down there than Pensacola." I'm going, okay. So he takes me out. Now, I'm not much of a drinker, but everybody drank beer. So we were shooting some pool. So he puts these 3 shot glasses up on the pool table. And on the third one, the third one, he lit it. He says, "These are a couple shots of tequila and 151 rum. Blow out the fire and drink it." So I'm going, oh man, I don't know about this. So I do the shots, right? I blow out the fire, I drink a beer. So we play pool for a little while longer. He does it again. So we go through it. And I'm thinking, hey, don't you put salt on your mouth and bite a lemon or something with this tequila? And I do it again. And so I did it, I want to say 3 times, but now I can't stand up. And I'm looking at Ricky, and there's nothing wrong with Ricky Gibson. And he was working me the whole time. He was putting water in his shots. And I'm drinking tequila, and he's drinking water. But the payback was he had one of them big-ass Thunderbirds. And back then, the seat, you pull it up, and you climb in the back. He took me out to his car to pass out, and I threw up all over the back seat of his car. So... anyway, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Are we getting close to the end?
Getting close. Howard and I are equally envious of each other. He always says, "Oh, you got to go to matches in the Tennessee territory every night," and I said, "You got to go to matches in the Florida territory every night," and you're kind of like the perfect linchpin between the two. So we're excited to have you here, Howard. What do you got, man?
Well, that's why Steve has been like at the core of my wrestling fandom, because 70s Florida classic wrestling. 80s Memphis was just Brawl City, and Steve is the king of both of those. So what I would like to do right now is segue into a quick lightning round, because I've seen Steve against all these people throughout the 70s, 76 through 79 with my own naked steaming eyes, and I would just like to get Steve's quick opinion on a couple of guys. Oh, before I do that though,
listen, I just got a warning, my battery's low, so
okay.
It said
go ahead.
All right.
I hit that. Yeah. So you got to.
I'll give you a quick one then.
If I disappear, it's not me. I promise.
I hope not.
Right.
If so, this has been tremendous. But what were Wednesdays like for you guys? Like, did you dread that day, or was
Of
it?
course you did. You got up and you went right straight to TV. You wrestled at a building, and if it was summer, it's 9,000 degrees in there, no air conditioning, no windows, no door. I mean, it's just like worse than auditorium. Then you stood around sweating because you couldn't dry off from your shower. It's so hot, and you're sweating, and you do interviews for 6 towns back to back. Then you get in your car, you drive to Miami, 250 miles.
Right.
And then you would get back in your car, drive home, and the next day you're in Jacksonville. So it was a rough day Wednesdays, but nobody
Right.
complained. Nobody
And you
complained.
guys, I figured it had to be a horrible day, and you guys never mailed it in. Miami was one of the most action-packed towns that you guys had. How would you rank the towns as far as the way they stack the cards? Like Tampa obviously was like the Bayfront and all that. You got names that never even came down to Miami. From what I saw, I think Miami was like number 2.
Well, what it was is it was on a loop. Miami was 2 weeks. I mean, was a week behind. We'd do a match in Tampa on Tuesday night, and that next night, Wednesday on Miami, we're doing the same match kind of angle way from the Tuesday before. Because
So it was like Tennessee. It was like Tennessee.
The tapes had to be mailed. They would have to record it in Tampa, show it. That was current. So Tuesday night, you'd see from the Sportatorium Saturday. But
it's like Louisville and Evansville and Memphis.
It was a week later. And the talent, it just ranged on, who they brought in, how they did it. But they'd center a lot of stuff, of course, around the Bayfront Center in St. Petersburg, Tampa, and that. And if they got big stars, then they wouldn't have to travel. They'd fly them into Tampa, and they'd maybe work, Saturday night at the Bayfront Center and drive over to Orlando, and then come back, skip West Palm, and go straight into Tampa Tuesday and go, bye, you're done. On.
Quick lightning round. I don't want Steve to die on us and all to go, oh crap, after all this. Okay, quick lightning round. Couple of your opponents that I've seen you work live in person. Just a couple words, whatever. Morocco.
Phenomenal. He was so at home in the ring. It was like you knew. To me, it's like a playground in there. And when you can do it blindfolded, and then you've got anybody that's magic. I can remember at one time, and this is real quick, there was people were yelling boring all around, and it was to incite the guys in the ring. It was trying to get the guys to do stuff. But it sounded like the same guy falling. But they did it one time, and me and Don were wrestling, and he went over to the corner, put his feet up on the corner and laid back, and he goes, "You think that's boring? Watch this." And he sat there. What a response. It was phenomenal.
You guys are my 2 all-time favorites. I saw you in so many good matches circa 1980, man, including that one when Backlund and Inoki came down. You were on that card against Morocco. Tremendous. Joe Ledoux.
Joe Ledoux. He was a funny guy. I taught him how to scuba dive. Just a big Canadian guy, kind of a big goof. And he was so naive. I mean, I was notorious for catching animals. Like I caught an armadillo and put it in Haku's bag. I caught snakes and threw them on. I caught a snake one time and threw it on Humperdinck in the dressing room walking by. I mean, but Joe, when I taught him to scuba dive, it was in Crystal River just north of Tampa, and his had so many gig marks on his head that the mask wouldn't stop leaking. And I couldn't stop laughing. And he's going, what you laughing at? And I'm going, brother, that's not supposed to leak. And I don't know what to tell you. Put your hand up there. And he saw a manatee underwater, and he's coming up to me. He's going, can you put them? Can you put them? I said, man, they'll eat you. And he goes, oh, no. And he wanted to get it. But anyway, Joe, great guy.
Good one for you. Ali Pasha.
Not as experienced, but I had a great gimmick. I mean, when you're trying to do stuff and gimmicks, I always, as a talent myself, I always wanted to know why they had so much heat on Nazis and Germans, except for in Miami, I got it because a lot of Jewish people. But that war had been over 30 years, and they're still like the top guys and the heels. I mean, I always thought that they should have a Vietnamese guy, a North Vietnamese guy or something, for heat. Anyway,
But
good.
Tojo could only turn like 150 times, you know.
But wait, you understand who I'm talking about, right? Ali Pasha, Ron Pope.
Who? Ron Pope.
Ali Pasha, Ron Pope.
No.
Big, black, bald-headed guy, great body, karate pants.
Yeah,
Okay,
did
the
I
only reason
work
I bring it
against
up
him?
is he lasted. That's it for me. He lasted about a week, and I
Well,
saw
that
you have
might be
a
why I don't remember. You're talking 50
No.
years ago.
I saw you have a 7-second match with him at the Miami-Dade Community College. It was Andre and Funk were in the main event that night, and
You
you
hear
had a
this, Tony?
7-second match.
Yeah, well, guess why? I mean, you don't think I remember? I mean,
Exactly. That's why
I had a guy at an autograph thing up in New Jersey come up to me, and he looks at me and goes, "You remember me?" I go, "No." He said, "I was your first match here in Worcester, Massachusetts when you were Skinner." And he said, "Man, you gave me all kinds of things. You were so nice to me and everything." He sent me the match, and I ate his lunch. I mean, he never saw daylight my first match on WWF as Skinner, but he put me on. Oh yeah, great. And I'm sorry, I don't know. The name kind of sounds familiar, but I figured some gimmick guy.
Yeah.
7 seconds doesn't last long in my history.
Two more quick ones, Howard.
Okay.
Who you got?
Okay. Tag opponents that you guys worked in the 80s. Sato Saito, spoilers, Cox and Duncombe. Any favorites or?
Yeah, Saito and Sato. Yeah, Cox and Duncombe. Duncombe was good, but he's a big guy, and he's working down. Mike Graham and I were smaller, or whoever, but it was like more of a bully kind of a match kind of guy. And Cox was older and kind of settled in his ways, and he shortcutted. He was a great friend and a great guy, but he would shortcut. He would work the audience more than he would work with you
That's
sometimes.
true.
And
That's
so
true.
Saito and Sato, not speaking much English, was phenomenal when you could blend and make movement between us without hardly any communication whatsoever. And then when they brought Masao Atori in, and it just lit me up because this is great. Masao's a shooter, been to the Olympics, and he's nervous wreck, and he's carrying a flag. And every time he'd turn when we'd get in there, and every time he'd turn looking away, I'd leg dive him. And I'd scream 2 points, and he'd be screaming it. And, it's like he was just so nervous. But I had a lot of respect. And I was there the night Saito got arrested with Patera. Me and Stan were on that flight in AWA when that whole thing went down. Those
McDonald's
two guys went
deal,
to prison.
yeah.
Yep, I was there.
Don't even tell it because it's in the book, and I think that would really entice people to purchase it because I think there is a version of that story that has never been told in public before.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's 2 books,
Yep.
Make sure you go to both of them.
I am so getting that second book immediately. The second
The
we
other
hang
one's
up.
over here, but I'll show it on the wrap up.
I had a ton of compliments on my book, but you know what? I got to give the credit to Ian Douglas, the guy that wrote my book.
He was just here last week.
Yeah, he was phenomenal, and he was so patient with me. Every Wednesday night, he'd call me, and we'd record for 2 hours. And you know what happens when you're trying to record 44 years of history? I had 44 years. I covered 4 generations of wrestlers. Most guys cover 1 generation, or they pick up where one's dropping off, and then they start one. So, yeah, he did a tremendous job, and I've had more compliments on it. And I always say it was Ian.
He's phenomenal.
I tried to edit it, and my book wasn't written to get rich on. My book was to hand down to my grandchildren. I've got 5 grandchildren that never saw me really in action, or of course not in my heyday, but I wanted them to be able to read it and not, have bad language and horrible things about people. I wanted them just to read a wrestling story.
Yeah.
And so I tried to do it like that.
You did a great job.
I asked Ian, I said, man, I know I dropped the F-bomb, but I'm a Christian. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm not the perfect guy, but I'm trying my best. I'm in my sunset of my life. So I want to go to heaven, and I want to do what's right in his eyes. And so when I do this, please help me. If I say a bad word in there, just talking to you, being cool or whatever, don't write it.
Yeah.
And he wrote a few things in there, and I'm looking at it, and I read it. I'm going, boy, good thing I read that. I mean, so
I proofed it. A good thing I
yeah.
proofed it.
Yeah,
Yeah, Ian was here last week. He's a phenomenal guy, really good friend, and does a great job.
yes, he does. He does a phenomenal job. You know what I asked him to do? I don't know if we're going to do this or not, but my dad wrote a book too. My dad wrote a book called Old Glory's the Most Beautiful of Them All.
Oh,
And
my
it's got a
gosh.
picture of him as a POW at 19 in World War II in Germany and as a POW at 39 in Vietnam.
Did it get published, Steve?
Yeah, it got published. It was by Durrance Publishing Company. But my dad was so humble as a soldier, and he considered that his job. He didn't want no sympathy. He didn't have no drama. He just told a story, and it's a phenomenal story. But I'm asking Ian if he'd help me go back and not rewrite it, but maybe write it from my eyes, because from the time I was 13 to 21, he was there. He was a POW, and he was going to be executed one time in Hanoi. They had him march through the streets, handcuffed and shackled, and we're watching it on TV. And I only got to see him maybe 3 times on TV, and we got a few letters. But all of that, it's an unbelievable story. But my mom and dad met on a train going opposite ways during World War II. My dad was in the Army Air Corps, my mom in the Navy. He got off and walked over to the other train, says, any of you girls don't have anybody to write to. I'm going to war. I need somebody. My mom raised her hand. They exchanged autographs. When he got shot down over there, she's working a teletype machine for the Navy in Chicago. She sees his name on there, contacts his parents. When the war's over, he got out. They got together, dated 2 months, and were married over 50 years.
Damn, that's a movie, man.
My mom's born on the 4th of July. My dad was shot down 9/11, 1944. My dad died 3 days before Memorial Day and was buried on Memorial Day.
Wow.
I mean, there's so many things that I just feel like if the right person wrote, when I worked for Vince, I gave a copy of the book to his producer company and movies, and they told me, says, well, it just doesn't have, razzmatazz or drum or whatever. And I'm going,
oh my gosh. Well, I don't like using my friends, but I'm going to use my relationship with Ian to get a copy of that once you guys get it done.
Yeah. Well, if you just get in touch with me, I've got it on JPEG. Jody Malenko's downloaded it on JPEG. You can't hardly find a copy. If you go on eBay, you can find it. Sometimes they're like $1,500.
You mentioned Jody. My friend Jonathan Snowden's working on a book for their family.
Yes, he is.
So,
sure is.
All right, Howard, you got anything else for Steve?
I am good, man. I am well satiated now.
Well, I enjoyed talking to you guys, and I appreciate your patience there.
You're fine, man.
Problem. I tried to tell you, Tony, make it simple.
Well, I've tried to. It's
that KISS theory. Keep it simple, stupid.
Well, I hope that won't prohibit you from coming back sometime.
Well, I didn't want you to think I was ditching you guys. I give it a when I started to sweat, I was thinking maybe I'm going to tell him I'm going to bed.
No, I told Howard. I said I'm in communication with him. We're going to make this happen. So
yeah, we did,
all right, man.
And we did. Well, God bless you both.
You too.
And good fortune and everything. And thank you very much for having me on and promote my book.
Well, thanks everybody for joining today. I had a fantastic time. Howard Baum and I have always have these interesting conversations. And I thought today I'd just hit record and we'd throw one of them on. So I hope you enjoyed Howard and I tossing the football around a little bit about the changes in wrestling. And it's not good. It's not bad. It just is. And so I try to stay out of the good and bad paradigm, try to stay out of the either or paradigm, try to stay into the both and paradigm. It's wrestling changed, and it's good for the people who watch it today. It's keeping it alive, and it's their wrestling. So they love their wrestling because today there's a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy out there in 2026. And when I was a 9, 10, 11-year-old boy in 1972, 1973, 1974, pro wrestling was what it was, and it was shaping the foundations of what I thought of as pro wrestling. And that is what I will always go back to when I watch the product. And now there's a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy out there in 2026 watching today's product, and that's becoming their wrestling. And that's been happening since 1925. And wrestling was coming to people's towns, and they were watching it, and they were becoming familiar with the paradigm that was around pro wrestling. 1935. 1945, 1965, 1975, and every 10-year period or so, people were making adjustments and wrestling was changing and evolving. Some people, when wrestling changed from 1955 to 1965, some fans didn't make the jump. They didn't make the change. They didn't like what was happening. They didn't like the world championship change from Lou Thez to Buddy Rogers. They didn't like those kinds of paradigm changes because Buddy was a lot different than Lou. And that continues to happen today. Some people make the jump and they follow the product and they're invested in it, and it will make them wrestling fans their whole lives, and they'll always go back to that initial experience of wrestling. Some people, like Howard said in our talk today, some people, the 1992 version of WCW is the wrestling that they first saw and that they really enjoyed. And me, as a wrestling fan, going from 1982 to 1992, I was becoming a lapsed fan because I couldn't make the jump with the product. And I think that happens to a lot of people. But the good news is, it continues to evolve, and it continues to survive, and it continues to thrive. I wouldn't have ever thought back in 1975 that there would ever be a wrestling show like WrestleMania broadcast globally and all of the things that have become. But anyway, let me take a look at Florida 1976 before we get out of here today. We focused in on Steve because that was our guest, so we focused in on him and the Roop feud primarily. Also going on, though, let's talk about what was going on in Florida in 1976. The key players were Bob Roop, Larry Hamilton, the Missouri Mauler, Thunderbolt Patterson, Eddie Graham and his son Mike Graham, Jerry and Jack Brisco, the Orton family, which that's another thing. Like all of these guys who commentate and comment on the product today, I was listening to one yesterday driving home, and this guy goes, well, Orton was on the phone with somebody, and he's saying, well, there's more than one royal family. And they're like, I don't understand that. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know what that means. Well, he's talking about his family. He's talking about Bob Orton Sr., Bob Orton Jr. He's talking about his uncle, Barry Orton, who are all in the wrestling business. He comes from a wrestling royal family. That's what he's talking about. And he's tired of Cody always talking about the Rhodes royal wrestling family. That's not that hard to understand. So anyway, I don't know where that's coming from. So Bob Orton Sr., Bob Orton Jr., they're in here, and they're Florida Tag Team Champions very, very briefly. And Bob Roop is eventually going to take Bob Orton Sr.'s place. And so Bob Orton Jr. and Bob Roop are going to be the tag team here. And they're planting seeds for this entire Roop-Orton alliance that is this is an early part of the year. That's going to dominate the whole year. Also at the forefront, though, Dusty Rhodes. And you've probably seen this on YouTube. It's out there where Dusty's doing the interview where his eyes kind of frozen. He might have Bell's palsy. I'm not sure how they did that interview, but he's got facial paralysis. And he sells it that it came from this attack by the Missouri Mauler because Terry Funk, who's the NWA World Champion, and he ran this angle in several territories. He ran it in Florida, he ran it in Kansas City, and a couple others where Terry hires a bounty hunter in the local territory to take out the number one contender. Well, Dusty is the number one contender in Florida, and Larry Hamilton, the Missouri Mauler, wants to collect the bounty And so of the amount of money, I can't remember how much it was, but so anyway, Dusty's on here doing this interview because he's been attacked by the Missouri Mauler. Terry comes out later on television and says, I'm not going to give you the check because you really didn't do the job. He's really injured, but he's not out of wrestling. Jody Hamilton is into Florida as the booker. And so there's been a change here from 74, where Bill Watts was the booker, 75, Harley Race was the booker. Now 76, Jody Hamilton's taking Harley Race's place because Harley's going back to be a regular in Kansas City and spend time at home. And so April 13th, 1976, at the Fort Homer Hesterly Armory in Tampa, Florida, the assassin, Jody Hamilton, defeated Billy Robinson to win the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. And here's where I think this was really, really smart. I mean, people might say, well, there you go again, the booker putting the title on himself and making himself the centerpiece. But the thing is, he really wasn't. Billy Robinson had been carrying that Southern title, and Robinson has this reputation of being this technical upper mid-card wrestler who was educated as a shoot wrestler in Wigan and was a trainer in Vern Gagne's barn. And so he had quite a reputation. So the assassin defeats him, and the assassin's ruthless kind of heel style, now juxtaposed against the technical wrestling of Robinson, gives that Southern title a little vicious edge. And he's going to be in the semi-main event on some cards, and he's going to be in the mid-card in some cards. So I just thought that was really smart of him as the booker to put a little spice into the middle of the card to add some heat and keep the assassin prominent as a singles wrestler and sometimes tag team wrestler. Oftentimes he wrestled with his shoot brother, the Missouri Mauler, even though they didn't recognize or acknowledge that on television. They did tag up some together. But I think doing that where it wasn't the main event, but it was a spicy middle of the card catalyst that really enhanced the Florida cards during this time. Now, also on April 21st at the TV taping at the Sportatorium, Bob Orton Jr. with Bob Roop at ringside faced Steve Keirn in a duration match. And this duration match ended in a disqualification because Bob Roop interfered. And so this is just a little taste of the Keirn-Roop-Orton war that's going to take place most of the year. There were several Florida heavyweight title changes that were just done right away. Pac Song, then Jack Brisco. The Mauler won the TV title. And the house show cards are all structured around Dusty Rhodes getting his revenge, trying to get in a position to have a title match with Terry Funk, and the Orton and Roop and Orton Sr., Orton Jr., and Roop tag title stuff with Steve Keirn and Bob Backlund. And we explained in the show about the Vince Sr. situation, wanting that person who's going to take the place of Superstar Graham to be in the Jack Brisco mode. And Eddie Graham wanted Steve Keirn for him, but he wanted Bob Backlund. And so the booking of the NWA around Bob Backlund is clearly with the Missouri title in St. Louis and this program in Florida. They're clearly getting him ready to go up to the East Coast and become the WWWF champion. So Bob Orton Jr., and the way that Florida, see if you agree with me on this, the way they weaved guys in and out of tag and singles programs it was brilliant, because they used tag team programs very, very well, but then they'd also use people in singles programs to really turn up the heat and augment it. Like they used Bob Orton Jr. to win the Florida title at the end of May. And Roop then stepped in. So then you had Bob Orton Sr. and Bob Roop holding the Florida tag team titles for about half a month. And then they lost them. And then they won them again and for a week or so. And had them in a feud with Jack and Jerry Brisco in a great feud. So the Ortons and Bob Roop were the premier heel tag team. The veteran power mixed in with Bob Orton Jr.'s youth and athleticism and Bob Roop's Olympic credibility. It was a powerful three-man catalyst for what they were trying to drive on the heel side in Florida, and using various bounty hunters against Dusty with Terry Funk, who is a champion who's coming into the territory about every 6 weeks or so. So the feud with Keirn and Backlund boiled over. And then in June in Tampa, Keirn and Bob Backlund beat Bob Orton Sr. and Bob Roop to win the Florida Tag Team titles, and they held those for a little over 2 months. And so this is a major babyface victory that launched Steve Keirn, because Bob Backlund is going to be moving up to New York. So now what they're doing is elevating Keirn. Well, Vince Sr. didn't pick Steve Keirn, so we have a lot of belief in him. Eddie has a lot of belief in him as a babyface. Steve mentioned that during the show. And so then they set up the personal singles program between Keirn and Roop. And it is just a master class in how to book a territory. What else did I want to say about it? I mean, you have this white hot, by this time, Bob Roop, who broke in, I think in 70 or 71, and now it's 76. So he's been around 5 or 6 years. He's been around a lot of the territories. The Funks, all three Funks put him over in West Texas. They all did jobs for Bob Roop. And Bob left before that could really, those seeds could really take root and grow. And I believe Bob when he says, well, I was a young kid. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know it was that big a deal that the three Funks all put me over. So I resigned, and told them I gave my notice and I wanted to go back to Florida because he didn't like the West Texas weather and the travel and the miles and all that. But anyway, he's this veteran that's pretty wily after 6, 7 years in the business. And you got this young, white meat, all-American Steve Keirn who has this story about his father, who's this military veteran that's just come home as a POW. It is just tailor-made, if everybody's in agreement on it and everybody's cool with it, is tailor-made for a great pro wrestling story. So after that June 29th tag team match, that personal angle kicked into high gear. And on the July 7th television at the Sportatorium, Steve Keirn, and he mentioned it during the show, he cut that emotional promo about Eddie Graham being his father figure, and while his real dad, Dick Keirn, who was in the Air Force and was a POW in Vietnam, but was away and was a prisoner of war, and Bob Roop comes out and interrupts him, and he mocks him on television, and he mocks the Colonel's POW history, calling him unskilled and a coward, and all of that stuff, which in 1976, this is the 200th year birthday of America, man. I was around, I was 13 in 1976, and I can still remember how unified and patriotic the country was and how it was a total year-long celebration for the bicentennial. And then they come out with this angle, which, as Steve said, it was his idea to do it, which his dad approved of it. And they generated nuclear heat, man. I mean, I asked Steve during the show, you probably heard where I asked him about Bob getting his life threatened in Miami. And so they had an amazing series of matches that basically defined Florida in 1976. We still may do, just for you, we still may do another Florida 76 show, because I want to get to the Dusty feud and talk about that a little bit more. I want to talk about Terry Funk's time in Florida a little bit more. And I want to talk about the Briscoes and what they were doing in Florida in 76. And a little bit about perspective about Jody Hamilton, the assassin, being the booker. Because by all accounts, they had a really good year in Florida in 1976. They were pretty red hot. So thanks, everybody, for listening today. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate you downloading our show every single week. If you really like to help us, here's how you can do it. You can hit that follow button and subscribe to our podcast. It may be follow, it may be subscribe. Different apps have different buttons, but if you hit that right now, if you're on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or whatever you're listening to the show on. It only takes a second, but it's a powerful vote for us, and it helps the show grow. It helps more old school wrestling fans and wrestling history fans like you find us and find the show. It adds into the algorithms and the search engines out there that are tracking the popularity of podcasts. And the more reviews, the more subscribes, the more follows we get, the more we get into that mix of algorithms, and more people can find us out here doing the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel History Show. So thank you so much. Appreciate you very much. Of course, you can come to my Substack channel and you can subscribe, Tony Richards 4 at the Substack Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. I do the Daily Chronicle Pro Wrestling History newsletter every single day. We just passed our year anniversary. We just passed the 365th issue of the Daily Chronicle. And now we're into year number 2 because of your support and the fact that we get subscribers every single day. And we want you to be one of them. If you want to contribute to the work I do financially, you can do that becoming a paid subscriber. It's just $5 a month. Or if you want to save a little bit, you can take out an annual subscription for $50 a year, and you can save $10. You can follow me on X at Tony Richards 4. You can come over to Facebook and join our Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Facebook group. And that's pretty much it. It's a wrestling history enthusiast supported entity. And I thank you so much for your support. Appreciate you. We'll be back here next week with another episode of the 1976 series as we go back in time to the Territory era. Remember, everybody, if you want better neighbors, you take the first step and be a better neighbor. This is Tony Richards saying so long, everybody, from the Bluegrass State.
Thanks for tuning in to the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Podcast. Tune in for another great episode next week, interviewing wrestlers, referees, and media personalities that have made the sport of professional wrestling great. We'll release a new episode soon. Don't you dare miss it.